I want to make up a small batch, about a 4-ounce batch, 125 grams plus prime, of 1/4-inch Miller glitter stars to serve as the inner core for some brilliant Comet outer petal TR style rocket headings, and also as the inner petal on some 7-inch brilliant multicolor star rocket headings. So I printed out my 125 gram batch worksheet of the Miller gold and silver glitter formula, and I have laid out some potassium nitrate, sulfur, commercial airflow charcoal, some dextrin, some atomized aluminum 325 mesh, some more coarse 50 to 150 granular aluminum. I like to use that half and half mix of those aluminums sort of per derrick specs in this formula worksheet. And so I will mix that up. The first thing I do is blade mill mix the potassium nitrate, the baking soda. I also have some baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, and the potassium nitrate, sulfur, and sodium bicarbonate. I just blade mill mix real quickly. I want 68 grams of the potassium nitrate. I thought it might be helpful for some of the beginners to see a batch of composition weighed and screened together right from the very scratch. There's 68 grams of that. And I want 20 grams of sulfur. There's 21. And I want 9 grams of baking soda, sodium bicarbonate. You can sure get your sodium bicarbonate cheap by getting Arm & Hammer baking soda at the grocery store. Those 3 chemicals are safe to blade mill together. While it's doing that, I'll weigh out 14 grams of charcoal, the 8 grams of aluminum, 6 grams of dextrin, and the little over 1 gram of the coarse magnesium. The aluminum I'll do half and half. Half and half of the granular, and the atomized 4 grams of each. Notice I'm weighing each chemical into an empty tub and then putting it into the mixing tub. I never weigh one chemical and then weigh another chemical on top of it. invariably I'll add too much of the second one and have to try to fish it out without getting any of the first chemical. It ends up just being a mess. So I've got my aluminum, my dextrin, my baking soda, my charcoal. Now I just want my 1 gram of magnesium, which is where? I'm sure I'm looking right at it. No, there it is. No, I'm not. Haven't even gotten it over here yet. And that's 2 grams. This actually calls for 1 1/4, but I round it up. I don't mind having a little more magnesium in the mix. I would normally be doing my mixing and wetting of compositions outdoors because it's a little bit of a dusty operation, but for videoing purposes I'll do it indoors here and just minimize the dust as much as possible and clean up my shop afterwards. So that should have everything that I'm looking for, and it should weigh 125 grams. There we go. Shake that and then weigh it to double check it. And I've got 128 grams, so I'm very, very close. So I'll put these individual chemicals away and then we'll go to the next step of mixing this composition. So I've got my batch. I'm going to shake that one more time. And I'm going to put it through a 40 mesh little screen here just to make sure that there are no clumps in the composition. I do have just a few little clumps of dextrin in there. That's what the screening step ensures are all broken up. I'll shake this again. Now I know that's a nicely mixed composition. This comp takes about 20% water to dampen it, which would be about 10% would be 12.5, 25 grams, maybe just a little bit less. I'm going to sneak up on 25 grams slowly. I've got just pure water. And I just spritz in some pure water. I think I'll take this to about 20 grams and then I'll start kneading it as a putty ball to sneak up on just the right consistency at the end there. There's 12 grams of water in there. 15. And there's 20. These are my cutting boards for cutting the stars before I get my gloves all nasty. I'll break out a couple sheets of waxed paper. I've got my 1/4 inch aluminum dowel spacers that I'll use for cutting. We've seen Paul Mulder dampening his composition and sneaking up on just the right amount of water so it doesn't get too wet. It's easier to add a little more water than it is to add less. Naturally with his, he could pour it in slowly and gradually till he had it just the right consistency. With this, I'm just spritzing it in just a little at a time. I'm getting just to the point where I've got a putty which will hold together. What I'll do is, just like Paul did, take my knife. First of all, I'll see if that putty ball can consolidate into a patty. Seems pretty good. And I'll see if my knife will cut it without crumbling it. And it's actually cutting pretty darn nicely, right at 20 grams. So I think I'm going to use it. Actually, it feels just a fuzz dry. So I'm going to hit it with just a couple more spritzes of water. This is one of those skills that just requires doing some of to really get the feel for what works and what doesn't. So there's a nice putty ball. It's not glistening wet, it'll hold its shape nicely, but it starts to create a nice patty when it's jostled some and patted some like that. My 1/4-inch spacers. My second cutting board. If I just move that back and forth and round a little bit, pretty soon it gets to the point where my second cutting board will roll back and forth on those spacers, which indicates that patty is thin enough. I'll be dusting this with black powder prime, which is 75 1510 potassium nitrate, commercial air float charcoal sulfur, plus 5% dextrin, and that's just screen mix, not ball milled or anything. And I just take a little fine mesh colander and dust this side of that patty. Put the wax paper back on, and I like to fold this end of the wax paper so that when I flip it, none of that prime comes out from between those two sheets. I'll press that prime into that side just a little bit, flip it with that folded wax paper down, and I'll dust the second side before I start cutting the stars. So now that's dusted nicely on both sides. And I've got my nice meat slicing cutting knife. Now we'll just cut slices 1/4 inch thick, wide, off the patty. And there's sort of a little bit of a trick. If I cut down and then angle the knife, that strip usually just falls right off of the knife. So I'm angling and then flipping that strip over so that the primed sides of the two strips are against each other and the unprimed cut side of that strip is up and also down. And this patty is just the right wetness. It's cutting very nicely and not sticking to the knife much at all. The glitter stars, I mean, I'm cutting these pretty evenly, but glitter stars aren't like a color star where you actually see the dot of the star flying out from a shell burst. You're basically just trying to create a trail of glitter spritzels with a star. So perfect consistency of star size, as long as they're pretty close, is not real critical. And there, that's nicely cut into just the right thickness. I'll dust this side with prime, and then the other side, flip it, and then I'll cut it the other direction into nice little cubic stars. I've got my folds together once again with wax paper. Press the prime just lightly into the side. Flip that with the folded wax paper down. Dust the other side with prime. And cut that reverse direction to get the cubes. And I'm getting nice little 1/4 inch, probably getting up to 5/16 inch with the prime on them, which will be very nice for the inner glitter spritzel petals on these little 4-inch cylinder headings or those 7-inch ball shell headings. So I've got them all cut into the nice little cubes. I'll add just a little more prime and then tumble them, and then I'll put them on a drying screen. Don't like to put glitter, especially this wet, into the drying box for a couple of days. I can get a reaction between the aluminum, the sulfur, and the potassium nitrate. So I will air dry these with some moving air on a drying screen for a couple of days. Then I'll put them into the drying box for a day and get them good and dry. But these are all nice and individually separated, nicely primed. They picked up the prime nicely. I'll just put them on a drying screen and an individual single layer and put some moving air on them for a couple days. So there it is, a nice little 4-ounce, 5-ounce batch of primed glitter stars. And there's the batch of stars sitting on a screen that does have some feet under it to allow air to circulate top and bottom. I will not leave these in the sun. I don't want them heating up in the sun. I just have them out here in the sun to get a nice little video of them. But I'll keep them in a shade in a warm, dry place with some air moving across them to get them dry before they go in the drying box.